Hey, my name is Sean Huss. This is Bhaskar Ghosh. Bhaskar is head of the AI task force. I am on the AI task force, and we've spent some time digging in on AI and trying to understand it. And we were trying to think of a way to reach out to faculty at Arkansas Tech University to help them understand what it is, mostly because we keep getting a lot of questions from our colleagues. We thought this may be one way to try it. So, what you're seeing is us attempting a rather amateurish podcast through WebEx. So with that said, we're going to talk through different issues. We will even at some point solicit questions from everyone and try to answer those questions over the course of the arc. We don't intend to make this more than it needs to be, but at the same time, if you guys want more, we can provide that. So, Oscar, you anything to add?
Absolutely. Like this is more like a controversial or conversational exploration of what AI is, and it's however you want to take it. We'll talk about how it works, and we also want to talk about what it means for higher education from today and tomorrow. Because as we've kind of some digging, and it was tough to find one AI podcast that was talking about people only in a higher education. So I thought this was a wonderful thing, and we thought this was a wonderful thing that we can kind of try to dig into, right?
Right. And answer questions if they come up.
Absolutely.
So I
Hmm.
think for episode one, even though it seems sort of redundant, I think it's an important place to start by asking questions like, what is AI and what can it really do? Because I think there's a lot of hype built around AI when in fact there's a lot that it really doesn't do. And we invest a lot of our hopes and our dreams in AI fixing a lot of the problems when it just simply cannot do that. So I don't know. What do you think?
Absolutely. And AI is now like it's turning into this all income, like, anything that is AI is not properly defined anymore. That's what I feel. I feel it's like a messy thing at this point. Like, anything that you really can wrap your head around, oh, probably AI is doing that, right? But but that's not always the case. I mean, like, AI is a messy term, like I said. So let's try to like unpack AI and kind of try like not make it a catch-all term, right? And bringing an analogy from the AI snake oil book, there's the vehicle analogy, right, Sean, that I
Right.
think we were discussing about, and I'll
I
let
think
you
it
tell
is.
that. And
Yeah, I think it is very good. We tend to use the word vehicle for cars, buses, bikes, spacecrafts, all other ways to get from point A to point B. But what we don't do is we don't realize that there are, that to use that all-encompassing term, particularly for AI, is sort of misleading
all right.
because AI is many different things. It's not just one big thing. And one way to try to unpack it is to try to parse it out in that respects. And at the same time, just to add some pepper to the mix here, when we talk about technology more broadly, technology is also normative.
Mhm.
And it adopts, AI would inherently begin to adopt, not that AI can adopt, but our use of AI, our norms would go into that. So things like more data equals better decisions. That's
Yeah.
horribly misleading and it's just
Hmm.
patently false, right? I
Right.
mean, it adds noise rather than signal. So we have to pay attention to the fact that when we do that, we're trying to treat it as a technological fix. So we can't just keep using terms like AI for
Hmm.
everything. We have to be really precise in what we're talking about, and that helps us write better policy, I think. What do you think?
Absolutely, and I think more people need to talk about that so that we know and we're aware of what AI exactly is, and we stop using this whole blanket term for every technology that we see out there, right? Because there's so much more going on than just AI when you get down into the nitty-gritties of things. And this also brings us to a very interesting ChatGPT prompt for the peanut butter sandwich Bible verse.
Right. So, and that brings up the fact that really what AI is doing is it's mimicking more than it does anything
Hmm.
else. It's not really thinking. And so we got to be careful. We don't want to anthropomorphize it and give it some sort of inherent power that it doesn't really have. It really just tries to guess at what's next, and it does it
Right.
through probability modeling. So you
Absolutely.
can ask it to do things and it will mimic very, very specifically. And that's a good example. You want to talk about that, or you want me to talk about the biblical
You
verse?
can take that one. You can take that
Okay,
one.
so just using it as an example, if you play with ChatGPT, you can ask it to write Bible verses about removing things like one example in a book was peanut butter sandwich removed from a VCR. Like write a Bible verse about that. And I actually have some text here where they tried that and it said, and it came to pass that a man was troubled by a peanut butter sandwich, for it had been placed within his VCR, and he knew not how to remove it. And he cried out to the Lord, saying, "Oh Lord, how can I remove this sandwich from my VCR?" And it goes on and on and on. But essentially, you get word back saying, "Fear not, my child, for I shall guide thy hand and show thee the way." So it's mimicking in many respects Bible verses, etc. One of my favorites that doesn't get as much press as I think it should is DeepSeek. When it was asked to write poetically what it was, its
Oh yeah.
response was, and I actually memorized this because I thought it
Hmm.
was so bizarre. It said as follows: "I am what happens when you attempt to carve God from the wood of your hunger." Right? And I think we need to be careful too, because that sounds, oh my God, that's profound, et cetera. And really all it's doing is just piecing together phrases, right?
Agreed.
And and it's like tarot cards. You can't give it more than it really is worth or what it really does. It's
Yeah.
mimicking more than anything
Hmm.
else. That could be a
Yeah.
problem because people build relationships now with AI.
That's true, and they end up believing AI as well, which
Right.
makes it even worse, right? Because at the end of the day, ChatGPT is just here to please you, honestly. And
Right.
that's how it starts hallucinating with stuff. Because I remember this example where somebody gave a piece of text to ChatGPT, and they were like, and it was very far away. It couldn't be read properly, and it asked ChatGPT, "Can you tell me what's written over there?" And ChatGPT was like, "No, I don't know what's on that wall." And they're like, "Are you sure? Can you please try again?" And then ChatGPT says, "Sure, sure, I can read whatever's on there," and it just starts spewing out text.
Right.
So,
And that's sort of an interesting feature because of the way it thinks. And just
mhm.
as a side note, if people want, we could put up articles and books and things like that on the webpage, make references because we're actually referring to things that we've read. And recently, uh,
Absolutely.
what was it? Claude, I think it was. They were trying to get
Hmm.
in and figure out how it actually thinks.
Yeah.
And and in general, it will hallucinate if it just thinks that it might have the answer.
Yeah.
So what it does then is it fabricates and builds in around this assumption that it thinks it has the right answer, and thinks
Yeah.
is even the wrong word. It has a high
Mhm.
probability that it may have something that approximates an answer is really kind of more
Absolutely.
correct. And
Yeah.
then it just guesses at what the rest of the answer should be.
Hmm.
So it doesn't know things. It plays this game of probabilities more than anything else.
Yeah. It probably just thinks that it knows things.
Right. I mean,
Yeah. And that's where all the mistakes come in. And this is one of the examples that we had also talked about was this poor little 85-year-old woman who was assessed by AI to be ready for discharge after 17 days. Yay.
right.
But then when she was home, she was still unable to walk in pain, but her Medicare payments had stopped. So I mean, you always need to take every AI or any of these new advances with a little bit of grain of salt. I mean, it does help you in situations, but can you trust it blindly? And that's something that um, we really need to think of as humans.
Right. And
Mhm.
that ties into how we use it, particularly in higher ed, and how the
Mhm.
students will use it. They trust that it will actually do the best work. And in fact, it really is not going to do that. It doesn't predict well.
Yeah.
At least not in certain circumstances. It's all a feature of how much data it has,
Hmm.
and the quality of the data. And, so these are things to think about. But maybe, we need to talk a little bit about, and this is more your area, where it comes from, kind of a history of AI, very briefly, so people understand it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, funny thing enough, like the first AI system that was built, that was back in 1951. It was even before the term AI was coined. So whenever you have any machine that kind of does a little bit of thinking, analytical thinking for itself, that's when you can start calling it, calling it somewhat of an artificial intelligence system. So, like I was said, the first AI system was a checkers playing program developed by by Christopher Strachey in 1951. And this was done in University of Manchester in England. And after that, 1956 was the big terming. That's when AI was coined at the Dartmouth University. But after that, things had slowed down a little bit just because, computers weren't developing fast enough to keep up with AI, right? That was the
Mhm.
issue that we kind of hit. But come 20, maybe, yeah, early 2000s, maybe 2010, that's when the whole boost started and devices started getting smaller, chips started getting smaller, and they started getting more powerful. And that's when AI really started to find its feet. And, that's when 2012 was ImageNet was the big thing where AI suddenly started to see things, right? It could make sense of scenarios. It could start making sense of things. 2015 was when generative AI hit the scene. And, my PhD was with generative AI. And when I started reading into generative AI, I was blown away by the easy, by how easy the whole thing was. Funny thing was, like, it seems easy now, but I'm sure it wasn't easy to develop because all Ian Goodfellow had done was he had pit two networks against each other and said, "Hey, you're going to be like an art thief, and you're going to be like an art judge. Every time this thief makes something, this judge is going to go over it and say, this doesn't look real." And it's going to go back to the thief again. The thief is going to, or the counterfeit artist is going to make
Mhm.
another piece of art, send it to the decision maker, and this is going to keep going on until the decision maker has a 50-50 chance of guessing if it's true or false, right? Because when you plant a seed of doubt in humans, that's when you're more likely to say maybe it's right. So that's what
Mhm.
they were going for. So probability of 50%, right? And that's where generative AI kind of started off. And it just never stopped after that. 2017, Transformers arrived. That's how our ChatGPT stuff came along. And 2022 was when, everybody knows about ChatGPT at this point. So that's a little bit of a background about how and where AI started from. And yeah, so it's almost like that the little matchstick spark of G that GPT brought into the whole thing, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah, no,
that's where, yeah, yeah,
but interestingly enough, we went to a conference not too long ago in
yeah,
Florida, and I
mm,
sat in on a session where they created a human AI. And
yeah,
what they did was they put us in modules, put us in nodes, and then the output from one node, mathematical, would go as an input into the next. And the goal was to see what happens to what they call the cost function.
yeah,
Now, I'm not trying to be boring, but it was really fascinating because they made the comment uh, that they reward AI. And I asked the question, kind of shut down the whole session. I
yeah,
said, can AI experience pleasure or pain? No. Does AI desire anything? No. Then how do you reward it? Right? Because
mhm,
rewards are very specific for people and kind of understanding the learning mechanisms. And
yeah,
so they started showing us the math, and really the way it learns is it reduces its error.
hmm,
That's what it's trying to do. And so I assume
absolutely,
that's kind of that's related to some of these innovations when you pit two systems against one another,
yes,
like the
mm-hmm.
art forger and the art critic.
Mm-hmm.
It's really just trying to come closer to whatever appears to be real or approximate it. Because when it's wrong, it's error. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and that is what it is.
And
That is really
so,
what it
yeah,
is.
and so that makes sense then. If it's a matchstick, it effectively lands on, decades of dry tinder in your analogy,
Hmm.
that
Yeah,
effectively those innovations are the things that sort of created the chat GPT that now everybody thinks is smarter than everyone else and does
absolutely.
amazing things. Like even with math, not to drift a little bit, but I
Yeah.
spoke with another guy, it was in that same session, who actually is one of the programmers who helps it learn math.
Hmm.
And he said that, because remember in my first presentation in January, I said, my understanding is it's not really that great at math. And I tried it with math, even with my son's geometry homework, and it would get it wrong. It would swap
Hmm.
positives and negatives, et cetera. And a couple of people said, well, no, I think it does math very well. So I asked the guy, and he said, well, it's about 95% accurate. That
Right.
what they're trying to do is they're trying to create that within the system, these checks and balances where it goes back and forth and checks it. And then I
Hmm.
mentioned that to Tom Nupp, just shout out to Tom Nupp, who's on our
Hmm.
faculty. And Tom told me that his son makes $50 an hour. His son, who went to Yale, makes $50 an hour simply doing math out longhand so that they can teach Chat GPT how to do math correctly.
That's
So,
true.
I mean, that should tell us everything we need to know about how it's actually learning, et cetera, right? But anyway,
Yeah.
that was an interesting story. So
Well,
yes,
and that's right, and that's important to know as well. Like, what's the data that's coming in? Because ChatGPT, again, like you said, it's just whatever data goes in, it just gets to train on that, right?
right,
And it's sometimes it ends up with garbage data, but sometimes it does end up with quality data. And when you have some quality inputs, you get quality output as well. So
right,
it's not all that bad.
right.
Yeah, and that kind of leads us to the how AI thinks or
Mhm.
like thinks.
Air quotes.
It, it predicts, right? It has predictions. It's more like a probabilistic kind of a model that AI has, right? Would you agree to
Mhm.
that? Because it's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
probabilities at the end of the day. Now, I'd like to, I'm not throwing you under the bus, but would you think that human reasoning is also probabilistic?
I think it is. And we even
Hmm.
study it in our disciplines like Soc and Psych and social psychology, which is really more my background, which is the
Hmm.
blending of the two.
Yeah.
There is a probabilistic sort of character to it,
Hmm.
particularly in everyday decision making and uncertainty. Uh, but it's different than logical or deductive reasoning. So that there are fixed rules for that. So yeah, in some respects, it's mimicking that too. I think the problem is we're not exactly sure how it does that. But I was speaking with David Ward, who teaches our
Hmm.
consciousness class, and I asked him,
Hmm.
I said, everything I've read about consciousness tells me we really don't understand it. And he kind of
Yeah.
laughed and said, no, that's true. So, we're kind of in the same space, if that makes sense. We've
Yeah.
created this thing that may actually mimic what we do, but we don't understand how it works because we also
Right.
don't understand how we work.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of a weird catch-22 situation, right?
Right. Well, it's like I mentioned the other day in another meeting where I was trying to explain. I used to be terrified, not really terrified, but I thought if there was going to be this existential moment for humanity
Hmm.
where we had to really figure out what being human meant, it was going to be when the aliens came to try to take our planet. And I said, well, I think what we've done is we've created the aliens, right?
That's
So we're at
true.
that moment where we need to reflect back, and human understanding and understanding people becomes more important. But
Absolutely.
AIs work a little bit differently because we can see what it is they're doing. So I would rely
Hmm.
on you to respond to this because I sort of generally understand it, but there's some terms that get thrown around that I don't think everybody understands, and I quasi do. And that is
Hmm.
things like tokens. Like, what's a token?
Yeah, so a token is basically just it can either be like a letter or a word when it comes to like LLM stuff. So, each letter can be broken down into a token. It's just a fancier way of understanding what it is because um, a space is also so you can't quantify that as a letter, right?
Mhm.
But for a machine, a space is also an input. Now,
Right.
how do I consider that as an input? So that's why they kind of changed everything to tokens. So that way, a space is a token, A, B, C, D, everything is a token, a letter is a token. So that just makes it a little easier for people to kind of understand
Mhm.
what tokens are. Yeah.
And so what it's doing in LLM, just define
Mhm.
that for everybody. So because we're throwing around terms.
Right. So that's large language modeling. So anything basically to do with words, with letters, with written text is just large language modeling, and all that's happening is it's kind of like you said, it's kind of predicting what you want to throw out there. So if you give it a prompt, it's going to go over that prompt, try to make sense of that prompt, and give you an answer based off of that. Right. And now there are a bunch of models that are out there. So those are your basic LLM models that you get that you hear of. There are many different kinds of LLM models out there. So OpenAI has their own, Facebook, Meta has their own, and they are using Grok has its own. Funny thing, Grok is a little more edgier. I don't know if you've used it or given it a try. It it
Love
it
that.
has zero filters. Okay, so it's gonna tell you what it thinks, like whatever it thinks, without any kind of filters.
Mm.
So yeah, these are like, different kind of models that you can fine tune these models using things called hyperparameters. And like I said, you can make your model a little more edgy. You can make your model a little more safe. Like Copilot had two settings, which I think was a safe setting or like an edgy setting, something like that. And they caught a lot of flack for this. So if you keep it on the safe setting, it's going to tune down your hyperparameters to not go crazy and make crazy predictions. And then it also had a crazy mode where it's going to go and reach out to the least probabilistic word, and it's going to suggest things to you.
Right, right.
Sorry for geeking
So,
out over there a
no, no,
little
no,
bit.
no. I think that's interesting, and it helps me in particular when I read this stuff. I'm still dipping my toe in it, but it makes sense because in that respect, that's why the prompt is so important when you write it, because you're actually giving it specific rules and parameters. And so you say something like, "Hey, tell me everything about cooking." It's going to go everywhere and start making things up because it doesn't have the guardrails that you have to put in with a prompt. And so I've noticed when I use ChatGPT, for instance, and I say, all right, let's do this, I'll get chaos, if it's broad. But if I say, let's break all this apart into step by step processes, let's go
Hmm.
step one, step two, step three.
Hmm.
And the reason I mention that is that's tied to going back to human thinking and probabilistic characteristics of human thinking.
Hmm.
ChatGPT by design, I assume, is just going to be more logical. And so,
Yeah,
and when it does that, it's not going to have that, for lack of a better word, intuition that we have that makes our probabilistic thinking probably work a little bit better for us and be a little more
right.
practical. It's very literal, is my
Hmm.
experience, I guess is what I'm
Yeah,
getting at.
and it's just things that it's been trained on. ChatGPT has been trained on more data than
Mhm.
other stuff. Again, when I say more data isn't always the goal. It's on good data, on clean data, polished data. That's what people are actually looking at, and I think that's what is more important. And it's funny that you brought that example up because I think I was listening to somebody say the other day that the next hottest programming language is English, right?
Yeah.
It's on how clean you can write your English because end of the day, I think the playing field has been leveled by ChatGPT. Nobody's like you can make something that you really haven't studied about anything, or you have no degrees and stuff, but you can ask ChatGPT to do it. How good ChatGPT does it, or if you have the capability to find all the flaws in that, that's a
Mhm.
separate conversation all by itself. But
Right.
anybody can come to ChatGPT and ask it to write them a piece of code, right? Literally anybody can do that in any
Yeah.
language that's available out there. But how do you have the capability of understanding that code, explaining that code, cleaning that code? That's a separate conversation. That's where I think human intelligence is still necessary.
Right. And that's one way to get your head around it. I mean, I've been thinking about this because I see it more as a mimic. And really what it does is it mimics reasoning. It
Hmm.
doesn't understand. And
Right.
so you really have to have that human dynamic and that human added value. So
Hmm.
one philosopher I was reading who was talking about the ethics of AI said that if you took an AI and you plugged it in and made it possible for it to do surgery on a patient, it would be a better cutter. It would be more precise. It would do the things, and it would still take in the data like blood pressure and blood oxygen, et cetera.
Hmm.
But it wouldn't be able to pick up on subtle signs that a surgeon with years of experience would have in sort of intuitively knowing when something was going wrong.
Right.
It just doesn't have that capacity. And so
Hmm.
it doesn't function in that way. And that's why, in that snake oil book, going back to it, the authors warn, look, don't give it more import than it really has. Don't give it
Right.
more capacity than it really has. It's really just mimicking more than anything else. And so I think that's relevant to students' work, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, like, like we can like tie the whole thing out and just kind of discuss like why do you think this matters for higher education? Just coming back to our the main idea behind the podcast.
Right. So, we know it's already in the classroom.
Hmm.
We know that students are already using it. Uh, I think it's already in many respects part of what we do. I mean, we know AI is everywhere, right? I mean, it's
Hmm.
it's in our phones, it's in WebEx as we do this
Right.
WebEx
That's
chat.
true.
It's I don't know, does it track the videos as we do them?
I hope not.
Yeah. So, but yeah. So in general, we have to ask ourselves the question, what do we do about this in higher ed? And I think we're going to tackle that more in the next session, if I remember correctly. But
Yep.
in general, I mean, what do you think? We know it's there, and we know we're going to need to adapt more than anything else. Some people may
Absolutely.
choose to use it, some people may choose not to use it,
Hmm.
but it's going to be, if those sessions from Florida were any indication, uh, this is going to be a skill set that students are going to have going forward,
Absolutely.
no matter
And
what your major is. So, yeah, what
mhm.
do you think? I'm just
Yeah,
curious what
absolutely.
you
Like,
say.
I think somebody had brought it up in one of the sessions that AI is creating those assignments, AI is answering those assignments, and AI is grading those assignments.
Yeah.
In class, like it or not, like even if people don't agree to it, but a lot of help is being provided by AI for all of that. So I think, I mean, it's time for us to kind of reshape our thought and go away from I need an A or this person needs a B. I think we need to be more of how we transfer the ideas of thinking, communication, camaraderie, all of these things that AI really can't
Mhm.
give you. I took a little informal poll in my class and I was like, hey, why are you coming to class? You can get all of this in for free in ChatGPT, right? Why do you want to spend our like 50 minutes in class with me speaking to you about all of this? And they were like, I can see you, I can hear you, you are making the effort. I feel passion from you whenever you're teaching. These
Mhm.
aren't things that AI can provide me. AI is just, it's basically vomiting some information that some person put in it with there's no personality, there's no personal touch to it. And these are the things I think, these are positive takeaways that we should also think about because it's not all lost in AI. I agree that, sometimes a lot of our assignments are being done by AI, but, I think we need to like rethink our assignments as well, right? And again, there's no one, no one magic wand that we can wave over everything and make it go away.
Mhm.
Because times change and technology changes. And I think I brought up this extremely controversial statement the other day, and I said, we should rethink the Turing test because it's it's not AI is starting to fool the Turing test as well. So again, will it be, I don't know, but that's just something that I kind of thought. And there are so many other things with AI as well. There was this recent webinar that I attended, and everybody was so concerned about biases with AI and what is this, through all of those biases, we are probably conditioning everybody to a certain standard or to a certain bias as well, because the kind of people who have created AI the amount of data in that AI would be skewed towards them, which is absolutely normal. This is for any kind of creation in this whole world that goes through,
Sure.
right? But how do we mitigate that bias is something that nobody has their heads around yet, right?
Right. Well, one of the things we do in the human sciences, the behavioral sciences, is we
Mhm.
try to become aware of any biases, and we're constantly reflecting back on whatever it is we're measuring, whatever it is we're
Yeah.
doing. AI doesn't have that capacity. Just for the
Right.
record, has no sense of self. It will use the
Mhm.
pronoun I, but it has no sense of self. It can't reflect back, and a lot of that for human beings is the core that makes us that sort of seeing self as object and being
Yeah.
able to reflect back is what makes us human and what makes
Mhm.
us moral creatures, right?
Yeah.
So, AI will probably not have, at least I don't think in my lifetime, will have that capacity. I mean, it may at some point,
Yeah.
then the whole game changes. But right now, where we are in terms of education, just to drag it back, not drift off into some
Yeah.
philosophical discussion, is that, GPT has passed a law school exam, it's
Mhm.
passed through medical licensing, it's passed business school exams. And I think really what that does is that asks, or it begs the question, if AI can pass these tests, are we testing the right things? And I think that's
Right.
what you're alluding to. That,
Okay.
the way we adapt is not to make students do busy work and not be so end product focused, but
Mhm.
instead focus on the process. I was trying to teach it the other day just for the fun of it, because everybody talks about how to use it in research. And so I
Mhm.
said, all right, well, I'm working on some research. Why don't I load in some of the data and let's see if I can teach it to do what I need it to. And if it does all the busy work, that's fantastic. And I'm going to check
Right.
it. And so I did. I loaded in some data, had it do some analysis like a logistic regression, and it did that pretty well, right? But then
Mhm.
when I started asking it for specific measures or to transform certain variables and to do other things, it absolutely screwed everything up. And I realized it was a student. I was having to teach it, and and I did this over spring break. I spent 4 days teaching it to do something. And then here's the other thing I ran into: at the end of every day, it resets, it forgets everything.
Yeah.
And even after 60 minutes, it times out. So I say all that to say that, yeah, in the short run, it can do these really remarkable things that we see as intellect, but really, I think it's more a reflection of the fact that we're measuring the wrong thing on the back end, meaning we've got to rethink how we do all these assignments. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and that is exactly, you hit the nail on the head over there, and I'm absolutely behind that. I think we need to rethink this because AI is just always going to be an easy cheat code for any of your past assignments that you've ever done, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And
And
online education as well. But go ahead.
absolutely, absolutely, and that leads us into the conversation of rise of agentic AI, and that's
Which
going to
is,
be a
yeah.
big next thing, right?
That's yeah. Then all bets are off, right? Then you have to
Absolutely.
rethink AI again, and that's happening very soon. I think
Oh yeah.
in the Amazon Alexa, aren't they about to go agentic?
They are, yes. So they want to go for Alexa Plus and, throw some ChatGPT behind it as well. And
So what is agentic AI? Just so everybody knows.
so right now, ChatGPT, for example, ChatGPT does like just one thing for you. Now imagine if ChatGPT had three or four personalities in it that would do every other thing for you. So, for example, if you want to order something, right? If you're hungry, right, you just tell Alexa, hey Alexa, I'm hungry, get me some food, right?
Mhm.
So Alexa has an agent which does the thinking and says, hey, based off of your profile from these few weeks, on a Wednesday at 12 p.m. you've generally always had Chinese food, so I'm just going to go ahead and order Chinese food for you. There's another agent that calls the Chinese food place and orders all of that food for it. There's another agent that connects you to DoorDash, puts all of that order in DoorDash, and sends the DoorDash order through it. and you have food. So it's basically a multi-agentic AI rise that's happening. So it's not just one thing that does, like, gives you an answer. It's not like one chat GPT imagined to be like 1,000 chat GPTs. And again, the example that I gave was pretty basic, but I'm sure there are more in-depth things that you can make agentic things do. And it really doesn't stop, right? You can think of any task. You just ask the agent to do it, or the whole AI system to do it for you. And it just releases an army of agents who do all of those little tasks for you.
Well, yeah, imagine what learning looks like when you get more than just suggesting ideas, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
agentic AI would rewrite it again. This is why we've got to be very careful on how we craft policy and we do the things because we have to see what's coming next, and I guess that's
Yep.
next, right?
Absolutely. And what does learning look like? Like you said, where are we? Like, where is originality? Where is effort in the era of agentic AI? So, that's just something that we need to talk about. And
Mhm.
yeah, so I mean, like, what would your closing thoughts for this first episode be?
Well, I think in general, AI isn't one thing, it's many different things, and we have to break it apart to try to understand it. I think
Hmm.
also it's not going away. And if we're going to use it, we need to make it fit into our world. We don't need to rely on it and sort of try to fit into its world, if that makes sense. It's a tool. It's
Yep.
a very impressive tool.
Hmm.
It does a lot of very, very high level things compared to, for instance, the calculator, because the
Right.
calculator just gives you a number.
Hmm.
The GPT can give you an answer and then try to explain that answer, right? So we
Absolutely.
got to think differently. I mean, what are your big takeaways?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the better we understand AI, the faster we can make everything a lot more easier for us.
Mhm.
And again, I don't want anybody to shy away from AI. I mean, if you're against the whole thing, that's okay. I'm not forcing it onto you, but it's just so prevalent in everything that you do. The more we kind of try to understand how it is, the better we can use it for our day-to-day lives. And it's not there all to harm us. The way that it's being used might harm us, but there are ways for you to learn and get better at it, so that it's not used against you.
Right. No, I would
Yeah.
agree. And
Mm-hmm.
so next time, what we'll do is we'll get into the practical stuff related to how do you adapt to teaching to this? How do you think about AI in terms
Yeah.
of instruction, redesigning
Mm-hmm.
assessments, integrity. I think ethics, excuse me, and academic misconduct are going to be a whole separate thing, mostly
Right.
because everybody focuses on that, but that's not the big issue.
Yeah.
It's the one that's out front. It's sort of the tip of the iceberg. But when
Mm-hmm.
we're talking about the impact of AI on education, it's much, much broader than that. And then,
Absolutely.
we'll throw these out there, and hopefully, if
Yeah.
people are listening, they have questions, they can send them in, and we can work those in to future conversations. We'll also invite people at some point too, I think.
Absolutely, that's the idea, and we open questions for the next episode as well. So if you listeners have any kind of questions, anything that you want us to discuss, anything that you want us to like research over and talk about, please feel free to reach out. Again, this is an open conversation. We don't want this to be like a one-way street, or like a Netflix movie that you're just watching. We are available. Just reach out to us, and we are going to make sure that we talk about everything.
Mhm. We'll try anyway.
Absolutely
Okay,
will.
so quick commercial and then we'll shut it down for this episode. Remember that our group has reached out to all departments and we want to have a conversation specifically with departments to try to get a feel for where everybody is on AI so that when we start writing this policy, we get it right. We need to measure 4 times and cut once and
Mhm.
have flexibility built in so that we can adapt it as we need to.
All
So,
right, sounds good. Thank you so much,
thanks.
John. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right.